Welcome back, everybody. In the last video we learned how to play cities and knights. Today we'll take a look at how to play the early game or the opening. So what are the goals of the early game? Basically, we want to build a solid and flexible infrastructure that prepares us for the rest of the game. So what's the best way to do this? I'm going to show you the 3 main moves that you should be prioritizing in the early game. We're also going to be evaluating these moves based on their flexibility, how blockable and robbable they are, and their threat level. So the 3 moves I'm talking about are building your second city, getting the aqueduct, which is the level 3 green upgrade, and getting on level 1 of all of the progress tracks. First, let's talk about getting on level 1 of all progress tracks. Why would we do this? So let's remember that a level 1 city upgrade gives you a progress card from a 1 and 2 on the red die with the given event die color, while only costing 1 commodity. It's basically kind of like a high return investment in your position. Now, while I do recommend getting on level 1 for all tracks, sometimes you don't have the means to do so and you can only upgrade 2 tracks instead of 3, in which case I recommend level 1 cloth and level 1 paper. This is because the progress cards in the yellow and green decks are more useful for flexibility and expansion. Now let's evaluate this move. I would say it's a flexible move because the progress cards you'll receive at any given point will help you make better use of your hand. Now of course you can't block or rob a progress card, so this move is not blockable or robbable. And finally, the threat level of this move is very low. You may see situations in the beginning of the game where you have the most city upgrades or the most developed city upgrades and people rob you. However, in most cases, nobody's going to look at the person with the level 1 coin upgrade and say, I must rob them. Let's look at this position. The first thing you'll notice is that I don't produce paper. So 4 for 1ing the brick for paper and going to level 1 paper is a stronger move than building a road, for example. Green cards such as the mining, or medicine, or road building, or alchemist, for example, could be very helpful in furthering my game, especially if I lose a city here. Here's another example. In this position, I'm only on 3 resources. I have no brick income and no ore income. Another thing you'll notice is that I have no yellow card income, but I do have a merchant in hand from the barbarians. And as you can see here, this merchant is pretty useful with the wood. So you'll start to see in positions like this, for example, that yellow cards are very important for flexibility, especially when you only have 3 resource income. So here a great move would be to use the merchant on wood and port 4 wood for 1 cloth and 1 coin. Then you're on all of the progress tracks, and you can give yourself a chance to get more yellow cards to make better use of this wood and sheep income. Here's another position where I have no ore income, and thus I will never have any coin income. You'll notice I'm not on level 1 coin just yet, and I don't really have any actions I can do with my hand. So here, a great move would be to port 2 sheep for 1 coin and invest in the level 1 coin upgrade. Now let's talk about the aqueduct. The aqueduct, many people believe, is the most overpowered move in the game. This is because the flexibility of getting the aqueduct is incredible. You can choose a resource of your choice when any number that you're not on rolls except for 7. At the same time, in the early game, the aqueduct is also a great way to threaten the green metro. Now, in terms of flexibility, the aqueduct is probably the most dangerous move out there. In terms of how blockable and robbable it is, if you block somebody's hex and that person has the aqueduct, they can choose a resource of their choice even though their hex is blocked, unless their numbers are coordinated. Now, in terms of threat level, the threat level of the aqueduct is very high. Usually, a common arguing point is that people say, this person has the aqueduct, you need to rob them. Now, let's talk about the choice between aqueduct and second city. So in this position, you'll notice that Either I can port my sheep for the aqueduct, or I can use my merchant on wood and port my wood and sheep for a second city. Usually, the aqueduct allows you to get a second city within 1 to 2 orbits, whereas here, for example, you'll notice if I city immediately on the 5, 9, 10, it's very unclear as to when I'll get the aqueduct. An important concept in cities and knights is self-sustainability. Usually people are a bit more reluctant to trade in this game because they know how powerful progress cards are. So, in terms of self-sustainability, the aqueduct is a lot more self-sustainable because the second city relies on dice rolls to get aqueduct. So, if I'm relying on dice rolls, I'm kind of relying on the 9, and I don't have a 6 or an 8. Now, let's look at this position from Blue's perspective. One thing you'll notice is that Blue only has 3 numbers. So they do have 2 cities, and they're good cities. However, if the 8 and the 4 don't roll, they don't really do anything in this game. So now I want you to imagine how powerful would Blue's position be if they had aqueduct. They're only on 3 numbers, 8, 4, and 10. So any other number that rolls besides 7 would give them a resource of their choice. Now let's talk about the second city. So this is a well-known concept in the base game, that if you city your original placement, you're basically citying your highest production spot. But in Cities and Knights, it's not only that. In Cities and Knights, you also city the spot that has one of the highest commodity productions on the board. Now here's the catch. So the flexibility really depends. This can be a very flexible move because if your numbers roll after you city, then you can do other things like get the aqueduct, expand, etc. But in the early game, the second city is a huge threat level move. So if people rob you while you're citied and you have no aqueduct, it can really slow your game down and maybe even slow you a few more orbits from getting aqueduct as well. Let's take a look at Black's position here. His original city is not bad, but it's not amazing. However, you can see that his 6-4-9 spot is arguably the best spot on the board. So if he were to city that, he would have an amazing position. The problem is, if somebody blocks the 6 wood, he may end up a little bit inflexible, and he needs to make sure that he has ways to make progress if his key hexes are blocked. Now finally, there are other great moves in the early game besides the 3 I mentioned. This is a great example. So you can see that Pink has expanded to the 9, 10, 11 as their first major move, I would say. And now you can see that Pink is the only player with 3 3-hex spots. So their production is great. When they city the 8-4-3, they'll have a great shot at the coin metro. And when they have the aqueduct, they'll be able to take advantage of any roll that's not on the numbers they're already on. So let's do a quick recap. Our early game roles are building a second city, getting the aqueduct, and getting level 1 on all tracks. Sometimes you may find yourself getting a 3rd settlement first as your first major move of the game in order to get a 3-hex spot or deny other players a 3-hex spot. Usually I recommend getting aqueduct before the second city for flexibility reasons, and you can also threaten the green metro. Also, you can use the aqueduct to get the second city, but you can't always use the second city to get the aqueduct. If you don't have the means to upgrade all 3 tracks, level 1 cloth and paper are the most important because of the progress cards they give you. When you're evaluating these moves or which order to do them in, always consider the flexibility, blockability, and threat level. Thank you for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.